I drove my old sedan to my daughter's wedding, carrying both my greatest treasure and a decision that would change everything. The engine made that familiar rattling sound, the one my daughter Clara had grown to hate, but I never saw a reason to replace it. The car worked just fine, and appearances never mattered much to me. My name is Daniel Carrington. At 62 years old, I've learned that true wealth isn't what shows on the outside. My late wife, Mary Ann, taught me that. We built our life from nothing. Just a small townhouse, second-hand furniture, and dreams that seemed too big for our bank account. I worked as a civil engineer, pouring concrete under the summer sun and running calculations late into the night. Mary Ann taught elementary school. We weren't rich by any standard, but we saved every penny, invested carefully, and lived well below what we could afford. That's what everyone thought anyway. The truth? I had quietly built a fortune over decades, smart investments, property holdings, and a knack for seeing value where others didn't. But I never flashed my wealth, never saw the point. My clothes weren't designer, my watch wasn't Swiss, and that old sedan, it had character. "Dad, can't you at least rent a decent car for my wedding?" Clara had asked last week, her voice sharp with embarrassment. "The Whitmores are going to think you're, poor." That's what she meant. The Whitmores, my soon-to-be in-laws, had old money, sprawling estates, and a reputation for looking down on anyone who didn't. I patted the USB drive in my pocket. On it was the last video Mary Ann recorded before cancer took her from us. I hadn't planned to use it tonight. It was just a comfort having her close. As I pulled up to the Whitmore estate, valets in crisp uniforms exchanged glances. One reluctantly approached my car. "Sir, the service entrance is around back," he said. "I'm the bride's father," I replied quietly. His face flushed red as he stammered an apology. Walking toward the grand entrance, I noticed how the chandeliers caught the evening light, how champagne flowed like water, how everything screamed excess. This wasn't my world, but it was the one my daughter had chosen. If you've ever felt judged based on appearances, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next would teach everyone at that wedding a lesson they'd never forget. The gap between Clara and me didn't happen overnight. It grew slowly, like a crack in a foundation that you ignore until the whole house is threatened. After Mary Ann died, Clara changed. She was 22 then, fresh out of college with big dreams. The grief hit us differently. I turned inward. Clara looked outward for comfort. She found it in a new circle of friends, people with designer clothes and trust funds, people who measured worth by zip codes and car brands, people like the Whitmores. "Dad, this is Gregory," she said one evening, bringing home a tall man with perfectly styled hair and a watch that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "His family owns Whitmore Industries." Gregory shook my hand firmly, his eyes scanning our modest living room. "Charming place, sir." I knew that tone. It wasn't admiration, it was pity. Over the next year, Clara spent less time at home and more at the Whitmore estate. When she did visit, she'd bring little upgrades for the house. "Dad, this throw pillow will brighten up the couch," or "I got you this coffee maker, the one you have is ancient." Each gift felt like a small rejection of the home I'd built. Then came the dinner, where she canceled on me to attend a Whitmore gala. I'd cooked her favorite meal, Mary Ann's lasagna recipe. It sat cooling on the table as I read her text. Sorry, Dad. Victoria invited me to their charity event. Rain check? Victoria Whitmore, Gregory's mother, had become Clara's new role model, a woman who wore her wealth like armor and used her status to judge others. That night, looking at the empty chair across from me, I realized I was losing my daughter to a world that valued appearance over substance. Would you let your child choose a fake world of wealth over real family values? Comment below what you'd do in my shoes. We've got it covered, Dad, Clara said, sliding the wedding planner's folder away from me. Gregory's parents are handling everything. We sat in the Whitmore's glass-walled sunroom, planning a wedding I was apparently not meant to contribute to. Victoria Whitmore sipped her tea, watching me over the rim with cold eyes. I'd like to help with the costs, I offered quietly. It's traditionally the bride's family who— Oh, that won't be necessary, Victoria cut in, her smile never reaching her eyes. We wouldn't want to burden you. Teaching salaries only stretch so far, don't they? I froze. Teaching? Clara's eyes darted away from mine. I told them you taught engineering at the community college. The lie hung between us. I'd spent 30 years building bridges and highways, not teaching about them. But somehow, in Clara's reimagined history, I'd become something she found less embarrassing. Later, as Gregory showed me around their estate's gardens, he mentioned casually, Clara says you've never owned stocks. My father could give you some pointers if you'd like to start building a portfolio. Another lie. My portfolio had outperformed the market for decades. That night, driving home, I called my financial advisor. Thomas, how much is my net worth currently? He named a figure that would have made Victoria Whitmore choke on her imported tea. And the Whitmore family holdings, can you find out? 2 days later, Thomas called back. Daniel, your assets exceed theirs by about 30%. They've been leveraging heavily for appearances. I hung up, wondering if I should reveal the truth. Would it even matter to Clara anymore? If you've ever had to swallow your pride while someone looked down on you, hit that like button. The choice I was about to make would change everything. The attic was dusty but organized, Marianne's influence still evident years after her passing. I'd come up here searching for my good cufflinks for the wedding, but instead found the small wooden box she'd asked me to keep. For Clara, she'd whispered in her hospital bed, when she needs it most. Inside was a USB drive labeled in Marianne's neat handwriting, for my daughter's wedding day. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. Marianne's face filled the screen, thin from treatment, but still beautiful, her eyes bright despite everything. My darling Clara, she began, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and you're starting a new chapter of your life with someone you love. I paused the video, my chest tight. Marianne had recorded this without telling me, knowing she wouldn't live to see our daughter marry. I pressed play again. I want to tell you about your father, Marianne continued. Not the man you think you know, but the man I've loved for 30 years. When we met, he had nothing but determination and dreams. While others chased fancy cars and big houses, your father built something more valuable, a life of integrity. She spoke about our early struggles, about my long hours and quiet sacrifices, about how I'd turned down promotions that would have meant moving Clara to different schools during tough years. What you see as simple, I see as extraordinary, Mary Ann said. The modest home that sheltered us. The old car that never stranded us. These weren't signs of failure. They were choices. Your father could have given us luxury, but he gave us security instead. The video ended with Mary Ann's gentle smile. Remember, true wealth isn't what you show, it's what you build when no one's looking. I sat in silence wondering, should I bring this message to the wedding? Would Clara even care any more about her mother's wisdom? Have you ever held on to someone's last words, waiting for the right moment to share them? The moment I chose would shake a family to its core. The Whitmore estate transformed into a fantasy world of white roses and crystal for my daughter's wedding day. Guests arrived in luxury cars, women draped in designer dresses, men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly expenses. I adjusted my tie, the same one I'd worn to Clara's college graduation, and patted my jacket pocket where Mary Ann's USB rested. "Mr. Carrington," a young usher approached me. "We have you seated in Section C." Section C, I discovered, was the back corner of the garden behind a large floral arrangement that partially blocked my view of the altar. Far from the family section, where the Whitmores sat proudly in the front row. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I'm the bride's father." The usher checked his list again. "No mistake, sir. These are the approved seating arrangements." As I took my seat, I overheard two guests behind me. "Who's the old guy in the dated suit?" one whispered. "Bride's father, I think. Some civil servant or something. Not really in the Whitmore's circle." I kept my eyes forward, dignity intact. The ceremony began with string quartet music. When Clara appeared, my breath caught. She looked exactly like Mary Ann on our wedding day. Our eyes met briefly as she walked down the aisle, but she quickly looked away, focusing on Gregory and his waiting family. After the vows, as guests moved toward the reception, Clara approached me with a quick, formal hug. "You look beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she replied, already glancing over my shoulder at approaching guests. "The head table is for immediate family, but we got you at table 12 with Mom's cousins." She was gone before I could respond, swept away by Victoria's guiding hand. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, you know the pain I felt in that moment. But what happened next would make everyone reconsider how they'd judged me. I needed a moment alone after being seated at table 12, far from my daughter on her wedding day. The bathroom seemed the only escape from pitying glances and whispered comments. As I walked down the hallway toward the restrooms, voices drifted from a small side room, the door slightly ajar. Clara's voice, then Victoria Whitmore's. I paused, not intending to eavesdrop, until I heard my name. "Your father seems uncomfortable," Victoria said, her tone dripping with false concern. Clara sighed loudly. "He's just out of place here. This isn't his world." "Well, we've done our best to accommodate him despite the differences." I should have walked away, should have preserved what little remained of my relationship with my daughter, but something kept me frozen in place. "I appreciate that," Clara replied. "It can't be easy having him here among your friends." Victoria laughed softly. "Darling, you're family now. We protect our own. I just wish—" Clara's voice dropped lower, forcing me to lean closer to the door. "I just wish he could have been different, more successful, more like Gregory's father." My heart cracked. After everything, The years of sacrifice, of putting her needs first, of building security she never knew about. This was how she saw me. "Don't mind my father," Clara continued, her voice clearer now. "He's harmless, just, well, a pathetic failure, nothing like your family. I guess I got lucky marrying into real wealth." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My own daughter, my only child, calling me a failure to impress this woman who'd known her for barely 2 years. Victoria's response was immediate. "Don't worry, darling, you're one of us now." I backed away silently, finding an empty service corridor where I could breathe. Memories flooded back, teaching Clara to ride a bike, working overtime to pay for her dance lessons, sitting by her bed when she had nightmares. All while quietly building a fortune she knew nothing about because I'd wanted her to value character over cash. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. I'd brought it as a keepsake, a connection to Marianne on this important day. Now it felt like something else entirely, a weapon of truth. Have you ever discovered someone you love has betrayed you behind your back? What would you do? Stay silent or expose the truth? The choice I made next would change our family forever. I stood alone in that service hallway, my daughter's words cutting deeper than any knife could. A pathetic failure? After everything I'd sacrificed, after every quiet victory I'd achieved without bragging, my first instinct was to leave, walk out to my old sedan and drive away, letting Clara live in her bubble of judgment and false impressions. But then I remembered the promise I'd made to Marianne as she lay dying. "Take care of our girl," she'd whispered, her hand fragile in mine, "even when it's hard, even when she pushes you away." Sometimes taking care of someone means letting them face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes love requires hard lessons. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, turning it over in my palm. Marianne had always been the wiser parent, seeing through facades to the heart of things. What would she advise now? The answer came clearly. Truth. Not for revenge, but for Clara's sake. She was losing herself in this world of appearances, forgetting what really mattered. I straightened my tie and walked purposefully toward the reception hall, where the wedding coordinator was arranging the evening schedule. "Excuse me," I said. "I'd like to make a toast to my daughter." She glanced at her tablet. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carrington, but we only have the best man maid of honor and Mrs. Whitmore scheduled for toasts." "I'm the father of the bride," I replied firmly. "Yes, but the approved speaking list, I need to speak." I rarely pulled rank or used my resources, but this moment called for it. I'd also need the projector set up for a short video. Her expression remained unmoved. "Sir, the schedule was approved weeks ago." I leaned closer. "My net worth is 3 times that of the Whitmores. I'd consider it a personal favor." Her eyes widened slightly. "Sometimes, just sometimes, money talks when nothing else will. If you believe parents should stand up for themselves even when their children push them aside, hit that like button." The toast I was about to give would silence a room of 300 people. The reception was in full swing when the coordinator tapped her glass for attention. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as guests turned toward the head table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we have a few toasts to the happy couple." Gregory's best man went first, with stories of college adventures and brotherly bonds. The maid of honor followed with tearful memories of friendship with Clara. Then Victoria Whitmore rose, elegant in designer silk. When Clara first entered our lives, I knew she was special, she began, her voice carrying across the ballroom. Some people just belong in our world, don't they? Gregory couldn't have chosen better. Her eyes flicked briefly toward me, a subtle reminder of who belonged and who didn't. Then came Clara's turn. My daughter stood, champagne flute in hand, radiant in her gown. I want to thank everyone for coming today, she began, especially the Whitmores for welcoming me into their amazing family. The life you've shown me, she gestured around the opulent room, is everything I've dreamed of. She paused, then added with a small laugh, and thank you to my father for being here tonight. Even though he doesn't have much, he gave what he could. I guess not all fathers can provide the way the Whitmores can. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. My hands tightened around my water glasses. Something inside me finally broke. The coordinator approached the microphone. We have one more toast this evening. Mr. Daniel Carrington, father of the bride. Surprised murmurs spread through the room as I walked to the front. Clara's smile faltered, confusion crossing her face. This wasn't part of her perfect plan. I took the microphone, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. For those who don't know me, I'm Clara's father. I've been quiet most of my life, working hard, saving carefully, and putting my daughter's needs before my own. The room fell silent, guests sensing something unexpected. Clara called me a failure tonight, I continued, my words landing like stones in still water. She's embarrassed by my car, my clothes, my apparent lack of success. Clara's face drained of color. Victoria Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't going to say anything, but sometimes children need to learn that appearances can be deceiving. I nodded to the coordinator, who dimmed the lights. The projector hummed to life. Before I continue, I want you to hear from someone who couldn't be here today, my late wife, Mary Ann. The screen behind me flickered, and Mary Ann's face appeared, causing gasps throughout the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Have you ever been pushed too far and finally decided to reveal your true self? What happened next would change my daughter's perception forever. The ballroom fell completely silent as my late wife's face filled the screen. Mary Ann looked thin, but determined, her eyes bright, despite the illness that would take her just weeks after this recording. Several guests dabbed at their eyes. Seeing a dead woman speak at her daughter's wedding wasn't what anyone had expected tonight. My darling Clara, Mary Ann began, her voice soft but clear, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and you're starting your new life with someone you love. Clara stood frozen, champagne glass still in her hand, tears already forming. I wanted to share something important with you on your wedding day, Mary Ann continued. Something about your father that you might have forgotten or never fully understood. The camera pulled back slightly, showing Mary Ann in her hospital bed, but sitting upright, determined to deliver this message. When your father and I met, we had nothing. Our first apartment was so small we could barely turn around without bumping into each other. A small smile crossed her face at the memory. But Daniel had something rare, a vision for our future and the discipline to make it happen. I watched Clara's expression change from shock to confusion. While his colleagues bought fancy cars and took expensive vacations, your father invested. While they upgraded to bigger houses with bigger mortgages, he repaired our roof himself and put the savings into your college fund." Mary Ann leaned closer to the camera. "Your father worked 60-hour weeks for years, Clara. Not because we needed the overtime for bills, but because he was building something he never bragged about." The room remained utterly still. Even the servers had stopped to watch. The modest home you grew up in, paid off when you were 12, the simple lifestyle you sometimes resented, a choice, not a necessity. Your father could have given us luxury, but he gave us security instead. Victoria Whitmore shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Gregory looked between his new wife and his mother, confusion evident. "I know how the world works, sweetheart," Mary Ann continued. "I know people judge by appearances. The Carringtons were never about appearances." She paused, taking a labored breath that reminded everyone of her condition when this was filmed. "Your father is not just a good man. He is the strongest, kindest soul I've ever known. He sacrificed more than you will ever understand. Every choice he made, every hardship he endured was for you. The clothes you wore, the school you attended, the life you had, it was built from his sweat and sacrifice." Clara was openly crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "And Clara, don't ever mistake wealth for worth. Money fades, but character, that is what defines a person. Your father is the richest man I've ever known, not because of money, but because of his heart. Never forget that." Mary Ann's voice broke into a whisper. "Cherish him, Clara. He is the best part of me." The video ended, Mary Ann's face freezing on screen for a moment before fading to black. In the darkness, sobs could be heard, not just Clara's, but from throughout the room. When the lights came back up, all eyes turned to me. I stood tall, the weight of pretending finally lifted from my shoulders. "Mary Ann recorded that message knowing she wouldn't be here today," I said quietly. "She wanted you to understand something I was too proud to explain myself. If you've ever been misjudged based on appearances, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. But what I revealed next would turn this wedding reception upside down." I looked directly at my daughter, ignoring the hundreds of eyes fixed on me. This moment wasn't about humiliating her, it was about truth. "Clara, your mother was right about everything," I began, "except one detail she didn't fully explain." I took a deep breath. 30 years of privacy was about to end. For those who don't know, I worked as a civil engineer for 3 decades. Not a glamorous job, but a necessary one. I built bridges, highways, foundations, things that last. And while I was building those, I was quietly building something else. The room was absolutely silent. Even the Whitmores were leaning forward. "Your mother and I invested for decades, carefully, consistently. We lived well below our means, not because we had to, but because we chose to. We didn't need to prove our worth with fancy cars or designer clothes." I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket, the portfolio summary my financial advisor had prepared. "My net worth today is just over $27 million. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara's mouth fell open. Victoria Whitmore's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "That includes commercial properties across 3 states, a diverse stock portfolio, and minority ownership in 2 tech companies that went public 5 years ago." Gregory's father stood up straighter, reassessing me with new eyes. "I never flashed my wealth because I wanted to be judged by my character, not my bank account. I wanted my daughter to value people for who they are, not what they own. I turned to face the Whitmores directly. When Clara brought Gregory home, I was happy for her. When I met his family, I hoped they'd see beyond appearances. Instead, you judged me by my car and my clothes. You seated me in the back corner of my own daughter's wedding. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of red. Her husband stared at his shoes. "Clara," I continued, my voice softening as I addressed my daughter again, "when you called me a pathetic failure to Victoria earlier today, you broke my heart, not because I care what the Whitmores think of me, but because I realized I'd failed in the most important job I had, teaching you what really matters." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she realized I'd overheard her cruel words. The truth is, my portfolio outperforms the Whitmore family holdings by about 30%. I nodded toward Gregory's father. "Your financial advisor has been making some questionable investments lately. You might want to look into that." The older Whitmore's face paled. He knew I was right. "I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone," I said, addressing the room again. "I'm telling you because appearances can be deceiving. The quiet man in the corner might be the wealthiest person in the room. The flashy family with a big house might be drowning in debt." I folded the document and returned it to my pocket. Judge people by their character, not their clothes. Value them for their hearts, not their homes. That's what Mary Ann and I tried to teach Clara. That's the lesson I hope she remembers from today. I raised my water glass. To the bride and groom, may you build a life rich in the things that truly matter. The room erupted in applause, not the polite, restrained kind, but genuine, emotional applause. People stood, glasses raised, all except the Whitmores, who remained seated, their perfect world crumbling around them. If you believe money doesn't define a person's worth, hit that subscribe button, because what happened after my revelation would prove exactly who had real class in that ballroom. The reception transformed in minutes. The same people who had ignored me all evening suddenly found reasons to approach my table. Businessmen slipped me their cards. Women who had whispered behind their hands now smiled warmly. It was amazing how quickly $27 million could change someone from invisible to interesting. "I had no idea," one of Gregory's uncles said, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "You must share your investment strategy sometime." I nodded politely but kept watching the head table. The Whitmores huddled in tense conversation, their perfect composure shattered. Victoria's face was tight with controlled fury. Her husband kept glancing around the room, assessing the damage to their social standing. Gregory looked shell-shocked, caught between loyalty to his family and the bombshell I'd dropped. He kept reaching for Clara's hand, but she sat motionless, staring at her plate. "Mr. Carrington?" A server appeared at my elbow. "Would you like to move to the family table?" Mrs. Whitmore suggested. There might have been a seating error. Too little, too late. "I'm comfortable here, thank you." As the band started playing again, guests began approaching Clara. I watched their interactions from across the room. The awkward pats on her shoulder, the forced smiles, the quick retreats. No one quite knew what to say to a bride whose wedding had just become a public family drama. Victoria eventually rose and began damage control, moving from table to table with practiced charm. "Such a lovely surprise," I overheard her telling a group of guests. We always knew Daniel was accomplished, of course, so modest about his success. The lie was smooth, but no one was buying it. The whispers had already started. By tomorrow, the story would be all over their social circle. How the Whitmores had misjudged and mistreated the quiet millionaire. I didn't care about their embarrassment. I only cared about Clara, who finally looked up and met my eyes across the room. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her expression a mix of shame and confusion. I gave her a small nod, not angry, not gloating, just acknowledging the truth that now stood between us. When the cake was cut, I slipped out to the terrace for fresh air. I hadn't wanted to create a scene. I'd only wanted my daughter to see me, really see me, for once. Dad? I turned to find Clara standing in the doorway, her wedding dress glowing in the garden lights. If you've ever had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for yourself, you know the crossroads I faced. What would happen next would determine if my daughter and I had any relationship left to save. Clara stood before me, her wedding dress slightly wrinkled, her carefully styled hair coming loose. She looked young suddenly, not the poised society bride, but my little girl who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would it have mattered?" I countered gently. "Would knowing I had money have changed how you saw me?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You called me a pathetic failure today, Clara. Not because I failed to love you or provide for you, but because my car is old and my suit isn't designer." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I didn't mean—" "You did mean it," I interrupted, keeping my voice low. "You meant every word. You've been embarrassed by me for years. The question is why?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "They're all so perfect. The Whitmores, their friends, everything about them is polished and impressive. And that matters more than character, more than how people treat others?" "You don't understand," she said, frustration edging into her voice. "In their world—" "Their world is built on appearances," I cut in. "Victoria Whitmore looked down on me while her family's company is leveraged to the hilt. They judge by brand names while hiding their own financial troubles." Clara's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Ask your new father-in-law about the Anderson property deal. Ask why 3 board members resigned last quarter." She shook her head slowly, processing this new reality where the family she'd idolized had feet of clay. "Mom knew," she said finally. "About the money. Your mother knew everything. She helped build it. We decided together to live simply, to focus on what matters." Clara wiped at her tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad. What I said to Victoria—" "Hurt deeply," I finished for her. "Trust, once broken, isn't easily fixed." "Can you forgive me?" Her voice cracked. I looked at my daughter, Mary Ann's daughter, and saw both the child she'd been and the woman she could become. "I forgive you because Mary Ann would want me to," I said quietly. "But trust is earned, Clara. It's not given back just because it's convenient now." She nodded, understanding the road ahead would be long. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you love? Comment below if you think forgiveness should be earned or freely given. The journey Clara and I faced would test us both in ways we never expected. 3 days after the wedding, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old acquaintances suddenly remembered my existence. Business contacts who'd never given me a second glance now wanted meetings. I declined them all. Money reveals people's true colors faster than any test could. Clara called daily. her voice hesitant and unsure, so different from the confident woman who dismissed me at her wedding. "The Whitmores are in damage control," she told me during one call. "Victoria's charity board is suddenly questioning her leadership." I felt no satisfaction in their troubles. "And Gregory?" I asked, concerned about my new son-in-law caught in the crossfire. "Confused," Clara admitted. "He thought his family was, well, better than yours. Finding out they've been struggling financially while pretending otherwise has shaken him." The truth was spreading through their social circle like wildfire. The Whitmores had built their reputation on being wealthier and more sophisticated than everyone else. Now that facade was crumbling. "Victoria keeps asking about your investment portfolio," Clara said. "She wants to mend fences over dinner." I declined that invitation too. My wealth wasn't a ticket to their world. It was proof I'd never needed it. Meanwhile, Clara tried to bridge the gap between us with daily texts and calls. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I let them go to voicemail, needing space to process 30 years of pretending versus one night of truth. "I don't know who I am anymore, Dad," she confessed during one call. "Everything I thought was important suddenly isn't." That was progress, painful but necessary. The hardest part wasn't the aftermath with the Whitmores. It was wondering if Clara's renewed interest in me came from love or from discovering my bank balance. If someone only values you after learning you have money, are they worth keeping in your life? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. 2 weeks after the wedding, Clara showed up at my door unannounced. She stood on my porch in jeans and a simple sweater. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry. Just my daughter, looking more like herself than she had in years. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, letting her enter the modest home she'd grown up in. She paused in the living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. "It hasn't changed," she said, running her fingers along the bookshelf where Mary Ann had arranged family photos years ago. "Some things don't need changing," I replied. Clara moved slowly through the house, stopping at memories she'd long ignored. The height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the dent in the wall from her teenage skateboard phase, the piano where Mary Ann had taught her to play. In my study, she noticed the photo of her college graduation. "You were so proud that day," she said softly. "I still am," I answered. "Of your accomplishments, Clara, not your connections." She nodded, understanding the distinction. Then her eyes fell on a wooden chest in the corner, one she'd never seen before. "What's that?" "Your mother's hope chest," I explained. "She started it when you were born." I opened it, revealing dozens of sealed envelopes, each labeled with milestones. Clara's first heartbreak, Clara's college graduation, Clara's wedding day. "Mom wrote these?" Clara whispered, picking up an envelope with trembling hands. "One for every important moment she knew she'd miss." My voice caught. "She wanted to be there for you, even when she couldn't be." Clara sank to the floor, letters scattered around her. She opened one labeled, "When Clara Loses Her Way," and began to read Mary Ann's handwriting. Tears flowed freely as she absorbed her mother's wisdom, written years before, but perfectly timed for this moment of reckoning. "I've been so lost, Dad," she admitted, looking up at me, "trying to be someone Mom would never have recognized." Have you ever rediscovered what truly matters only after losing your way? Clara's journey back to herself was just beginning, but the hardest step is always the first one. 6 months after the wedding that changed everything, Clara and I stood side by side at Mary Ann's grave. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet as Clara placed fresh flowers against the headstone. "Mom would be proud of you," I said, watching my daughter trace her mother's name with gentle fingers. "For what?" Clara asked. "For finally seeing what was in front of me all along." The months since the wedding had been a slow rebuilding. Clara had moved out of the Whitmore estate and into a modest apartment with Gregory. They were learning to live without the safety net of family wealth, Gregory taking cases based on merit rather than connections, Clara returning to teaching music at a local school. Victoria Whitmore had tried repeatedly to bring Clara back into the fold, but my daughter had found her backbone. "I'm done measuring my worth by your standards," she'd told her mother-in-law. The Whitmore financial troubles had become public knowledge when they quietly listed their vacation properties for sale. Pride comes before the fall, as they say. "I finally showed Clara my investment portfolio last week," I told Mary Ann's grave, "not because she asked, but because she stopped caring about it." Clara smiled. "Dad's been teaching me about long-term investing and living below your means, things I should have learned years ago." We'd spent evenings reviewing Mary Ann's letters, each one revealing her hopes for Clara's future, none of which involved marrying into money or impressing society. "Some measure wealth in dollars," I said, putting my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "Others measure it in dignity. The richest among us know which matters more." Clara leaned against me, stronger now in her humility than she'd ever been in her pride. "I'm learning, Dad. I promise." As we walked back to our cars, my old sedan and her now modest compact, I knew Mary Ann was watching, finally at peace with the family she left behind. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe for more real talk about family, forgiveness, and finding what truly matters. Some lessons cost everything to learn, but they're worth every penny.